11. Sopwith Camel. Perhaps the best remembered British warplane is the Sopwith Camel. The fighting machine entered service in the summer of 1917, helping to change the Royal Flying Corps' future. It was a peculiar machine, driven by a rotary engine that rotated so quickly it would spin out of control. But crafty pilots used this unique situation to whip around faster than their enemy and move them into a controlling position behind their opponents, turning the Camel into a splendid fighting aircraft. This one was part of the Royal Navy, serial number N6812, but became part of the newly formed Royal Air Force in 1918. The plane was being towed on a floating launch ramp behind a destroyer. On August 11, 1918, it was making the rounds of the North Sea. Earlier patrols had been endangered by Zeppelins flying overhead. So, when search team spotted one in the distance, Lieutenant Stuart Cully, a Canadian, was ordered to take off from his hazardous stage and shoot it down. Cully ascended at full throttle toward the unfriendly airship for more than an hour. When the lieutenant reached his position, he rotated to attack with 2 machine guns secure on the upper wing. One weapon jammed, but Cully still dumped all the bullets from the other into the German airship. As he flew away, the Zeppelin burst into flames and plunged 18,000 feet down towards the sea as he flew away. This Zeppelin was the final one ever shot down. Lieutenant Cully's celebrated warplane has been on display at the Imperial War Museum since 1935. 10. World War I Pompeii. In late 2019, the remains of dozens of World War I soldiers were properly laid to rest with full military honors where they sacrificed their lives over a century ago. The burials came amid an archaeological project known as Dig Hill 80, thanks to crowdfunding support. In Belgium, the site was excavated by a devoted team who dedicated their time to digging and raising the awareness and money necessary to carry out the project. The team unearthed the remains of at least 110 soldiers and dozens of artifacts, including bullets, rifles, revolvers, helmets, buttons, uniforms, belt buckles, and personal items like watches, toothbrushes, cooking utensils, water bottles, and a harmonica. Writing for the Daily Mail, British Belizean businessman Lord Michael Ashcroft described what it was like to see these artifacts in person, including a sauce bottle that, in his words, a British soldier had brought to the front lines, perhaps keen to disguise the grim taste of wartime rations. He also spoke with lead archaeologist Simon Verdigum, who said that his primary motivation for exploring the site was a quote from a German lieutenant who served in the war, saying, "The men don't fear death anymore. We have made our peace with the thought of our own demise. A much heavier burden is the fear to be forgotten in foreign soil, an inglorious end for any soldier." 9. Friedmans Badge. Alex Mason was searching for treasure with his metal detector in Charleston, South Carolina in 2020, when his device alerted him to a buried object in someone's backyard. The 2 friends he'd started the day with had given up on finding anything, but Alex remained determined and his efforts paid off. He dug just a few inches into the ground and retrieved a shield-shaped badge belonging to a soldier from the Niagara Fire Company, an all-black volunteer brigade that served in the Civil War. The badge is inscribed with the year 1861. The war started that April, and in December, the Great Fire of 1861 destroyed a large portion of Charleston. Many black fire brigades combated the flames, and these brave firefighters became increasingly important throughout the war. Starting in the late 18th century, formerly enslaved people in Charleston were required to register with the city clerk's office and get a Friedman's Badge to identify them as non-slave. The badge bore the initials WPP and was traced back to a brigade member named William P. Perry, who survived the war and lived until 1892. It's just a handful of its kind ever found. 8. Hand-to-hand combat weapons. On July 15, 1410, 15,000 soldiers marched into combat in the Battle of Grunwald. It was one of the most significant battles of medieval Europe and was part of a bigger conflict called the Polish-Lithuanian Teutonic War. The war was fought between the German Teutonic Knights Order and the Allied Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. The Polish-Lithuanian alliance fought against the Teutonic Knights' expansion along the Baltic Sea's southeastern coast, ending in a defeat of the Teutonic leadership. Most Teutonic soldiers were killed or taken prisoner, but the Polish-Lithuanian victory came at an immense cost, claiming thousands of lives on both sides of the battlefield. While sweeping the famous site in modern-day North Poland in 2020, metal detectorists found 2 battle axes dating back to the 600-year-old skirmish. Dozens of artifacts, including swords and spearheads, have been found at the site, but these are the only two known axe heads to be left behind from the battle, and they vary in design, with one having a longer, closed shaft and the other having a shorter, open shaft. Archaeologists were shocked by how intact the weapons were, and the discovery sparked an influx of experts and volunteers to the battlefield, hoping to discover more fascinating artifacts. 7. Ghost railroad tracks. Following a fierce coastal storm recently along the New Jersey coast, Cape May resident Liz Goldsmith saw some World War I era railroad tracks. They were revealed by the storm, along with coastal erosion and the daily low tide. Dating back to the early 20th century, the 100-foot, 30.5-meter stretch of track was first spotted in 2014. They've appeared a handful of times since then, usually after significant weather events. NJ.com reported the tracks were used for sand mining and World War I munition testing. According to local historian Ben Miller, some of the sand that was transported along them was used to make cement that went into building the Panama Canal. The operation was suspended in 1936 after local authorities became concerned that the sand harvesting activities were depleting the area's beaches. The tracks sit just a few miles south of another set of railroad tracks along a beach where the Bethlehem Steel Corporation exploded ordnances and fired shells into the sand in tests that were carried out for the US military and its allies. Do you think the tracks should be left in place as a historical marker or removed because of a potential safety hazard? Let us know in the comments, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. 6. Unexploded Civil War bomb. While conducting a metal detecting survey for a new hiking trail in Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield in Georgia earlier this year, archaeologists and volunteers discovered an intact Civil War bomb. They dug the 157-year-old 10-pound, 4.5-kilogram explosive known as a parrot shell up from 10 inches, 25 centimeters beneath the surface, and moved it to a safe place so a local bomb squad could safely discharge the weapon. It resembled a bomb commonly used by the Union Army and was probably left behind from the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. Fought on June 27, 1864 between Union General William T. Sherman's forces and the Confederate Army of Tennessee, the skirmish technically ended with a Confederate victory. But it wasn't enough for the Confederate Army to stop Sherman's forces from marching onward to Atlanta. The fight was part of a series of battles known as the Atlanta Campaign, which saw 67,000 soldiers wounded, captured, and killed. In a Facebook post, the Southeast Archaeological Center explained they found the bomb on the last day of the project, and it was thankfully equipped with a percussion fuse that didn't ignite when it hit the ground. 5. A Cuban soldier's defiant message. During the early 1960s, Cuba built a system of bunkers and trenches along the coast for if the US or any other Western powers invaded the island. In addition, the country was receiving economic aid from the Soviet Union. And while there was technically no actual combat going on between world powers, people around the globe feared Cold War tensions could erupt into nuclear warfare at any moment. This arguably came closest to happening in 1962 during a 13-day standoff between the US and the Soviet Union, known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. The disagreement was sparked by the installation of Soviet missiles in Cuba, which sits just 90 miles, 145 kilometers from the nearest American coastline. Archaeologists were recently documenting the Cuban bunkers when they discovered a message stating in Spanish that surrender wasn't an option, and that if war broke out, the individual was determined to fight. They believe a Cuban soldier wrote it, and it's one of several messages archaeologists have found on the walls of the bunkers. The interconnected system comprised many concrete bunkers, each with an opening that faced the Caribbean Sea, along with a rear entrance and 2 side exits. They've been abandoned since after the missile crisis ended, and while some remain intact, others are damaged from coastal erosion and other effects of time. 4. A mysterious headstone. Earlier this year, Richard and John Ryan were walking along the Cuyahoga River in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, when they spotted an odd-shaped stone in a nearby clearing. They wiped the dirt that had caked onto the surface, revealing an inscription that said Thaddeus J. Peck, 1711 to 1781. Realizing they'd just found something of historical value, the pair contacted the Cuyahoga Falls Historical Society. It's a strange discovery, dating back to several decades before Ohio was established in 1803, and before the Cuyahoga Falls settlement was founded in 1812. Whoever Thaddeus Peck was, he'd been spending time in the wilderness at 70, which was quite old when the average life expectancy in the US was 38 years old. When Peck died, the Revolutionary War was in full swing. The Declaration of Independence was just 5 years old, and the Continental Army, led by General George Washington, would continue butting heads with the British for another 2 years. Nobody has shed insight on Peck's identity or his reason for being in the middle of the Ohio forest. It's unclear what his profession was, but it's believed that it may have brought him into the area. His grave marker proves that he wasn't alone when he died. Researchers are working to understand these answers, hopefully. Meanwhile, the 200-pound, 91-kilogram headstone has been removed and is in possession of a local museum. 3. Trove of Civil War artifacts. Built in northwestern Alabama during the 1830s, a stagecoach stop and inn known as Pope's Tavern served as a hospital and command center for the Union and Confederate forces at various points throughout the American Civil War. It was a longer road that was built to connect Nashville and New Orleans under the command of General Andrew Jackson, who later became the 7th U.S. president. Last year, archaeologists found a trove of artifacts at Pope's Tavern, including pottery, glass, and nails that may predate the pub's construction. They also discovered the remains of a brick building that may have functioned as an outhouse, a hearth, or an outbuilding. According to the latest update, experts were performing a microscopic analysis of the building materials, hoping to uncover more information about their origins. While Pope's Tavern is most commonly remembered as a place where many died when all men between ages 16 and 60 were ordered to serve in the Civil War, it's believed that there may be earlier ruins beneath it, and that there's even more to the tale of its rich history. 2. Bronze rams. On March 10, 241 BC, in the Battle of the Agadi Islands, a Roman fleet of ships destroyed a fleet of Carthaginian vessels off Sicily's northwestern coast. They sank to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. It marked the end of the First Punic War with a Roman victory. During these sea battles, warships deliberately crashed into one another to sink the enemy or get close enough to an opponent's vessel to board it and engage in hand-to-hand combat. During the Battle of the Agadi Islands, hundreds of warships collided as the Carthaginian fleet attempted to reach its resupplying station in Sicily. To protect against damage and maximize the level of destruction against adversaries, militaries of the time equipped their ships with metal rams. Last year, archaeologists found the remains of some of the wrecked ships from the Battle of the Agadi Islands scattered along the seafloor, where they've sat for nearly 2,000 years. Since then, they've recovered 6 bronze rams, several bronze helmets, Roman and Greek coins, and dozens of slinger bullets, which were used as deadly projectiles during the battle. It's one of the best documented archaeological battle wrecks to date. Besides offering new insight into the Battle of the Agadi Islands, the discovery has led to several other findings, including a nearby merchant shipwreck dating to the 3rd century. 1. Ancient Greek helmets. Earlier this year, archaeologists in southern Italy announced the discovery of 2 helmets, weapon and armor fragments, pottery shards, and the ruins of a temple to Athena in the ancient Greek city of Velia. They said they believed the items were connected to a maritime skirmish that happened 2,500 years ago, known as the Battle of Alalia. For 5 painstaking years between 540 and 535 BC, the Greeks battled an Etruscan-Carthaginian alliance off the coast of Corsica. The Greeks had set up a nearby colony, Alalia, and defeated the 120-ship Punic Etruscan fleet with just 60 ships. But the Greek victory came at a cost, and the violence prompted many of Alalia's residents to move along the coast of southern Italy, where they were closer to other Greek settlements. One of the recently discovered helmets was designed in the Greek Chalcidian style. Developed during the 6th century, it has one of the widest geographic ranges of all Greek helmets. The other helmet resembled the headpieces worn by Etruscan fighters and may have been stolen from defeated troops during the Battle of Alalia. Besides the helmets, archaeologists unearthed the remains of what appears to be a temple to the Greek goddess of war Athena, some vases, and a Greek inscription translating to the word sacred. The 60 by 23 foot, 18 by 7 meter ruins were found at Velia, the new settlement established by those who fled Alalia in 540 BC. Do you think wartime artifacts belong in museums, or should private citizens be allowed to own them? Share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel to show your support. See you next time.